Hi everybody, this is Mr. Duncan in England. How are you today? Are you okay? I hope so. Are you happy? I hope so. The festive season is here again, and as a way of celebrating this time, I have decided to tell you a story. However, this is no ordinary tale, for what you are about to hear is one of the most famous stories ever written. The author's name is Charles Dickens, and the story is A Christmas Carol. To describe Ebenezer Scrooge as mean is, to say the least, a gross understatement. Scrooge is what you might call a miser, a tight-fisted businessman who does not take kindly to parting with his money, a gentleman who lives frugally and prefers to keep himself to himself. Since his long-term business partner Jacob Marley died, Scrooge preferred to work alone. Well, that is not entirely true. He had help in the shape of Bob Cratchit, who worked for Scrooge as a clerk. Cratchit is a humble family man and a devoted husband and father to 5 children, the youngest of whom is Timothy, or as he is more commonly known, Tiny Tim. Little Timothy is a sickly child who has to walk using a crutch. More often than not, Tiny Tim can be seen being carried around, high on his devoted father's shoulder. Every Christmas, Bob Cratchit would ask for the day off from work, and every year came the same reply from Scrooge: no. After a hard day at the bank, speculating and investing, Ebenezer headed home through the cold streets of London. It is the day before Christmas, and everyone is full of joy. Well, almost everyone. Scrooge meets his nephew, who kindly offers a place at his Christmas lunch the next day. Scrooge bluntly refuses the offer with a curt "Good afternoon." "Merry Christmas, Uncle Scrooge," chirped the nephew. "Merry Christmas? Bah, humbug," barked Scrooge. Beggars and charity collectors lined the streets, holding out their hands to Scrooge, who in return pushed them aside with a despising grunt. "Ugh! Are there no workhouses for these people? I say let them die and reduce the surplus population." As he continued his way home, Scrooge passed many people, including a gas lamp lighter, a theatre promoter, and finally an old blind woman. They all received a scolding as in turn they encountered Scrooge. The old woman replied with a warning to Scrooge to change his ways or bad things will happen to him. Of course, Scrooge ignored these words of warning and continued on his way. Finally, Scrooge arrived at his front door, but just as he was about to put the key in the lock, a ghostly green light appeared before him, and what seemed to be a human face briefly stared back at him. "Scrooge!" The face spoke once and then was gone. Scrooge froze in terror on the spot. Could it be Jacob Marley, his former partner? Of course not. By coincidence, Marley had died 7 years ago on that very day, Christmas Eve. Shrugging off his fright, Scrooge walked into his house, sat down and poured himself a hot bowl of gruel. Sitting comfortably in his high-backed chair, tired and a little shaken from his earlier fright, Scrooge began to eat. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. But who could be calling at such a late hour? The clock had just struck midnight. Scrooge looked out of his bedroom window and down towards his front door. But there was no one there. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps and rattling chains filled the room. Scrooge sat down again, by now shaking with fear. Then, without warning, the bedroom door flew open and a ghostly figure entered the room, his face white with dead staring eyes, his body bound with chains. Behind him dragged a large metal cash box. "What do you want with me?" screamed Scrooge. "Much," replied the ghost. "Do you not recognize me? In life, I was your partner, Jacob Marley." "I don't believe you," said Scrooge. "You might be an undigested bit of beef or an underdone potato. There's more of the gravy than the grave about you." These words angered Marley so much that he roared with rage, making the whole room shake. "I believe, oh I believe," screamed Scrooge. Marley's ghost spoke again. "My greed has forced me to wear these chains forever. You, Scrooge, have a chance to escape this fate. Tonight, you will be visited by 3 ghosts. The first will arrive at midnight." A combination of fear and tiredness overwhelmed Scrooge, so he made his way to bed, climbed in and went to sleep. But not for long. The church bell struck midnight. Scrooge awoke with a start. Then, into the bedroom came the first spirit, a white glowing apparition that seemed to float on air. The spirit spoke. "Hello." "I know you," said Scrooge. "Hush now, let me speak. I am the ghost of Christmas past. Come, let me show you your earlier life. Walk with me." With those words came a flash, and there it was, a scene from Scrooge's childhood. Scrooge's father was being taken away by a jailer. He was going to prison. The father called out to the young Scrooge, "Don't make the same mistake as me, Ebenezer. Work hard and save your money." This was a very painful sight, as it was the last time he ever saw his father alive. The spirit of Christmas past spoke. "You have lost all those you have loved. Your mother, your sister, who died while giving birth to your nephew." "Why do you remind me of these things?" asked Scrooge. "It is not all bad. Remember your early working days as an apprentice at Fezziwig's, and the girl you met during that time? They were indeed very happy times." Oh, what fun it was working for Fezziwig. He always looked after his employees. Christmas was always celebrated in a big way with a large party, which included lots of food and plenty of dancing. From spending just a couple of pounds, all that happiness was created, said the spirit. Scrooge seemed to agree. The sight of his younger self had melted Scrooge's cold heart, just a little. Another scene appeared before them. This time it was an older Scrooge, with the girl he had met in the previous vision. This time the vision was not a happy one. By this time Scrooge had become obsessed with making money. The girl was breaking up with Scrooge. "Oh, spirit, show me no more," cried Scrooge. The spirit spoke. "Do not blame me for this, for these are the things which have happened, and they are what they are. They are what they are." Scrooge found himself back in his bedroom, and the light from the ghost slowly faded away. All Scrooge could do now was to get back into bed and wait for the next hour to strike. The clock struck midnight again. Scrooge knew that something was about to happen. He crept out of bed and walked around the house. "I'm behind you." Scrooge turned round and found himself staring back at a large figure, a man dressed in a flowing green robe, with a crown of holly sitting on his head. "I know you," said Scrooge. "Maybe you do. I am the ghost of Christmas Present." The ghost held out his hand. "Touch my cloak." Scrooge hesitantly took hold of the sleeve, and suddenly they were in another place, a small London street. They were standing outside the window of a small house. The ghost and Scrooge peered through the window at the scene taking place inside. It is Bob Cratchit's house. They were preparing to eat their Christmas lunch. Bob entered the room carrying Tiny Tim on his shoulder, and they both sat down to join the rest of the family to eat. However, the table was almost bare. Just a pot of potatoes and a small goose was all that was there. Despite the meagre meal, the family still seemed happy. They all laughed and cheered as they celebrated together. After the meal, Bob held Tiny Tim close to him. The little boy looked weak and sickly. "What will happen to Tiny Tim?" asked Scrooge. "Will he live?" The spirit looked at Scrooge. "It would be better for him to die now and decrease the surplus population." Scrooge cried out, "Oh, spirit, you use my own words against me." "The shadows are already cast. If future events follow the same course as now, then the boy will surely die." "Three cheers for Mr. Scrooge." Bob Cratchit raises his glass. Scrooge felt a pang of guilt. He always treats Bob so cruelly, yet he was still willing to raise a glass and wish him well. The Cratchits have so little, yet they are so happy and content. Scrooge looked through the glass one more time as the scene slowly faded from view. The spirit of Christmas Present carried Scrooge off again to a group of miners working deep underground, a lighthouse in the middle of nowhere, and a boat out at sea in a storm. In all of these places the people were cheering and celebrating. Despite the terrible conditions, they all appeared happy and content. Finally, they arrive at the home of Scrooge's nephew, Fred. The house is full of happy people, and the dining table sits groaning under the weight of all the food. The guests sit down to eat. Fred tells his guests about his encounter with Scrooge and his use of the word humbug, along with his hatred of Christmas. Scrooge has money, but he does nothing good with it. He despises Christmas and the celebrating of it with us. But the only person he is really hurting is himself. Finally, Scrooge and the ghost walked on along the street until they saw a small boy and girl huddled together. They appeared cold and miserable. "Whose children are they?" asked Scrooge. "They are the children of mankind. The boy is ignorance, and the girl is want. Beware of the boy, for on his brow is written doom, unless that writing is erased." Scrooge looked concerned. "What will happen to these children?" The spirit spoke. "Are there no workhouses?" the same words spoken by Scrooge earlier. "The hour is upon us. Soon I must leave," said the ghost. The clock began to strike, and the ghost of Christmas present was no more. A ghoulish howl and a thick mist crept forth. This was the third ghost arriving, and the one that Scrooge feared most. The ghost of Christmas yet to come. The spirit stood before Scrooge, a fiendish figure in a black hooded cloak, pointed towards yet another scene. However, this one was not so easy to understand. 3 people stood together, each clutching a small sack. One by one they reveal the contents to a man who wishes to buy them. The contents include bedsheets, clothing, and curtains, obviously stolen from a dead man. "He won't need these now he's gone. Good riddance too." Scrooge tried to make sense of the vision. "So, Spirit, you are saying that the fate of this man may one day be my own?" The ghost said nothing, but pointed again to a group of people standing together in the distance. As Scrooge got closer, he could see that they were standing at a graveside. A small wooden cross marked the spot. It was the Cratchit family. Bob Cratchit held in his hand the small crutch that belonged to Tiny Tim. He places it gently over the small grave and bows his head. Scrooge, overcome with emotion, falls to his knees and weeps. Little Tiny Tim is dead. "Oh, Spirit, I feel our time together is coming to an end," said Scrooge. The ghost pointed towards another grave and urged Scrooge to look at it. Reading the inscription on the gravestone, Scrooge at last realized the identity of the dead man whose belongings had been stolen. "Ebenezer Scrooge!" he wailed. He then pleads to the spirit. "Are these the shadows of the things that will be, or are they shadows of things that may be?" At that moment, Scrooge realized that he himself must change his ways, so as to ensure that the events he had been shown would never occur. With that, Scrooge found himself back in his bed. It was Christmas morning, and this time it was for real. Scrooge leapt out of his bed and raced to the window. He shouts down to a passing boy. "Hey you, boy!" The boy looks up. "Young man, do you know what day it is?" "Why, yes, sir. It's Christmas Day." "Good boy!" Scrooge excitedly exclaimed. "Do you know the local butcher's shop in the High Street?" "I should hope I do," replied the boy. "Oh, what a clever boy!" Scrooge ran down the stairs and opened his front door. "Now, go there and pick up the prize turkey that's hanging in the window and bring it here. I will pay you, of course." It was Scrooge's intention to send the turkey anonymously to the Cratchits. It was hard for Scrooge to hide his joy. He felt as giddy as a schoolboy as he danced around his house. Scrooge then got dressed and went outside. He knew what he had to do next. He stood outside his nephew's house and knocked the door. His nephew was surprised to see him. "It's your old Uncle Scrooge come to visit. Will you let me in, Fred?" "Of course I will. Come in and join us," replied his nephew excitedly. For the first time in a long time, Scrooge was able to experience the warm welcome of a family circle and the love that comes with it. The following morning, Scrooge sat in his office, waiting for Bob Cratchit to arrive. He was late. Eventually, he did walk in, over 18 minutes late. Scrooge pretended to be annoyed. "What time do you call this?" barked Scrooge. "I'm terribly sorry, sir. I'm afraid I was making very merry yesterday, and I'm still recovering from it," whimpered Bob. "Well, I won't stand for it. This will never happen again." Scrooge paused. "Do you know what I'm going to do?" "No, I don't," replied Cratchit. "I'm going to raise your salary. Merry Christmas, Bob Cratchit." By now, the streets were filled with people who were all still enjoying the festive season. Scrooge and Bob Cratchit walked outside to join them. From that day on, Scrooge became the best friend and a second father to Cratchit's children, including a very strong and very much alive Tiny Tim. Ebenezer Scrooge became as good a friend, as good a master, and as good a man as the good old city knew, or any other good old city, town, or borough in the good old world. I hope you have enjoyed today's seasonal tale and the message contained within it. The act of giving is a gift unto itself, and as I always say, kindness creates more kindness. Is this true? Could it be real? I hope so. May I take this opportunity to wish you all the best for 2012, wherever you happen to be in the world. This is Mr. Duncan in England saying thank you for watching me, teaching you, and of course, ta-ta for now.